December can be a time of great hope for people around the globe. And I know that children hope for certain things at December. You know, when I was a kid, now my kids still think that I was actually born and lived during the Stone Age. They think that I carved out my Christmas list on stone tablets to give to Santa Claus. Now today we know that kids that are 2 and 3 years old, that all they do is send a text or an email to Santa Claus, and they got the link to their Amazon.com cart. You know, they've got all 314 items in there. They expect the guy in the big red suit to show up with all of these things. So it's a different type of hope. We've got a couple of young ladies visiting with us today, Tinsley and Bella. Good to have you here. And these young ladies are hoping to get into a college somewhere. Now, Tinsley's on a 2-year tour of colleges, trying to figure out which one she wants to go to. She's a softball player. Some colleges are interested in her, but she's not sure yet which one she's interested in. Bella, I'm not sure what your criteria is. You're a cheerleader. Do they give scholarships for cheerleading? They do. How cool is that? Wow. Honey, maybe this is my opening then. I could go to college somewhere. You folks didn't see the look I just saw there. Yeah, we can hope for all kinds of things, can't we? And that's what our focus on Advent is for this week. This truly is a season of hope. Because if we didn't have hope as Christians, we would have absolutely nothing. There would be zero for us to hang our hat on to say, this is what I'm looking forward to. When we think about the birth of the child Jesus, God's Son, we celebrate this gift. And it is an amazing gift that He has given us. This is certainly a glorious time for believers as we fully embrace the truth that Jesus is the reason for the season. It's not how much money we can spend or how pretty we can decorate the church or the wrapping on the gifts. Jesus is the reason for the season. We always have to keep that at the forefront of our thoughts. Now that's easy for us. As believers, we say, this is it. This is what it's all about. But not everyone in our society, in our world, thinks like that. There's a group called the Washington Ethical Society. And I wonder about any group that has to describe themselves as being ethical. But they describe themselves as a vibrant, humanistic congregation. There's a key word in there, maybe you picked up on, humanistic. Humanistic is a polite word for atheism. It's all about people. It's all about us and what we can do, what we're capable of, and what we can pull from our universe. They believe in the created rather than the creator. On December 1st, 2017, their webpage described an upcoming presentation for December 3rd of 2017. The title of the program was, Should We Keep Hope Alive? Was the alternative to bury it and put a tombstone over it? I mean, should we keep hope alive? Is it a good idea or even possible? Now, this is the description they're given for this program, this seminar they're going to conduct. Presenter Amanda Popeye will explore the interaction of lamentation, solidarity, and that elusive hope. I have to wonder, how do you go through life if you got nothing to hope for? Nothing you're looking forward to, nothing you're planning on, that you're anticipating, that hope is so elusive that your world just doesn't almost exist. How sad would that be? You and I might find the approach that the humanists have as to be rather dark, rather sad, because whether or not they would ever acknowledge it, they probably would not admit it. There's actually a biblical justification for their lack of hope. If we look at Job chapter 8, we see Job, and of course we know the story of Job and all the trials, the difficulties that he went through. Job 8:13 reads, such is the destiny of all who forget God. Not that, I forgot there was a God. No. I intentionally blocked him out. I didn't know I want him. I did not acknowledge that God is alive. Such is the destiny of all who forget God. The hope of the godless will perish. So for these humanists, that's what's happened to them. Their hope has disappeared. They say it's elusive. It's gone for them because they have no future as you and I do. But Psalm 38:15, I put my hope in you, Lord. You will answer, Lord my God. You see, now we just sang those songs to start our service today. My hope is in you. My strength is you. My spirit is in you. Lord, those are the things that we had. My hope is in you. And that's what we want to have as Christians. That's what we want to share with the world. Because if we got hope, it shows on your face. It's in your mannerisms. It's how you conduct yourself, how you deal with people. They know there's something different about you because there's just hope on your face. We want to share that with others. This morning we're going to look at a passage that gives us the foundation for our hope. We're going to be looking back in the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 9. And there's a verse in here that's going to be very familiar to a lot of folks, but we need to get the full context of what's going on here. We'll begin in the first verse of chapter 9. Nevertheless, the gloom of the distressed land will not be like that of the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future he will bring honor to the way of the sea, to the land east of the Jordan, and to Galilee of the nations. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. You have enlarged the nation and increased its joy. The people have rejoiced before you as they rejoice at harvest time and as they rejoice when dividing spoils. For you have shattered their oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did on the day of Midian. For the trampling boot of battle and the bloody garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us. A son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. The dominion will be vast, and his prosperity will never end. He will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. What a wonderful passage of Scripture as we look through this, because there's a number of promises that we see contained in here. Each verse just about has its own promise. The first promise we see, hope for brighter days. As we move rapidly through the days of fall, and we're heading headlong, we're just right on top of winter. If you've lived in Nashville for any period of time, what do we know about winter days in Nashville?
You never know.
They're gray, they're gloomy, they're overcast. I mean, it just seems to be every winter we get more and more gray and gray and gray, and it's like, oh golly, will spring ever get here? How many of you ever felt that way? And this does affect us. It affects us psychologically. There's a thing called seasonal affective disorder. And it's because we're seeing less and less sunlight and more gray. And we don't like that. But unfortunately, that's what Nashville brings. That's why Jim and Carla in about 4 weeks are going to be bailing out and going to Florida. They've got a 14-bedroom house, so we can all go down and stay with them down in Florida. We'll just spend the winter there. And then when it turns bright again, we'll come back to Nashville. This desire for brighter days, it may be rooted in the trouble that we face in our day-to-day lives. Sometimes we've got challenges, whether it's with our job, it's with our children, it's with our work. We can have all kinds of difficulties, and that makes it hard for us. All of us want to have bright days when the kids are doing well and the job is percolating along and the finances are good and we're physically healthy and everything's just going the way we would like. We want that. But those gray clouds sometimes roll in over our world. And the kids aren't doing as well as we'd like. And the marriage is struggling. And the finances are sort of precarious. And the job is tenuous. And we just don't know from day to day. And that's tough to deal with. We want to see brighter days. So when things do pick up a little bit, that's why we celebrate so. And we should celebrate. We should praise the Lord for that. Sometimes we need hope for a change in our world, change what's going on. There was a Peanuts comic strip, and here's Snoopy. And Snoopy's got his little bubble. He's thinking, yesterday I was a dog. Today I'm a dog. Tomorrow I'll probably be a dog. Oh, there's sure not much room for advancement in this line. And maybe you felt about like Snoopy has sometimes. But you know, there is hope even for those people who feel like they're leading a dog's life. Let's go back to verse 1 of this passage. Nevertheless, the gloom of the distressed land will not be like that of the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. In the year 733 BC, Assyria invaded the nation of Israel. And they conquered and annexed the northeastern land of Naphtali, northwestern land of Zebulun. How would you like to have your country overrun? And suddenly you got this new government that's running everything. Some of your people have been taken away, never to be seen again. This is what they were facing. This conquering nation put the heel of their boot on these portions of the nation of Israel. This was 2 of the 10 tribes that had formed the northern nation of Israel. Now you think, why would God allow that to happen? It's simple. Israel had turned its back on God yet again. If we went further back to the left in the Old Testament, we'd see time and time again, Israel has failed God. They've turned their back on him. They've worshipped idols. They've gone to other nations and accepted their gods. And God has repeatedly said, okay, you're going to pay a price for this. So he allowed these 2 territories to be taken over by Assyria. Assyria finally conquered the entire nation of Israel. Why would we turn our back on Jesus? Why would we say, God, I know you emancipated me, for the Egyptians, or for the Israelites, what happened? They were emancipated from Egypt. He took them through the desert. He got them into the promised land, set them up forever. And they said, well, we'd like these other gods too. Why would people do that? And we will never know the answer, certainly. So God then used this foreign nation, this godless nation of Assyria, to humble his people. Now imagine if America was suddenly invaded and we're conquered and we lose all the freedoms that we have. And we're having to live in this other environment that we're nowhere close to at this point. But we can look around the globe at other countries, we can see the pictures and we see the videos and we hear the horror stories. And that's what we could be facing. How much would that change your daily perspective on life? To know that you're going to have to go stand in the line to get bread, get a little bit of soup, perhaps once a month to get some butter or some milk. You see, these are the kind of things that we take for granted. Our life would change so much. We would be hoping for change. But God is telling us in this verse there is hope for brighter days. He's saying the gloom is gone. He promises this bright, glorious future. And that's what we want to really hold on to. This bright, glorious future, of course, comes in the form of Jesus Christ. We look at Matthew chapter 4, the first of the Gospels. He left Nazareth behind and went to live in Capernaum by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. Remember these 2? This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, along the sea road, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who live in darkness have seen a great light, and for those living in the shadowland of death, light has dawned. The people who live in darkness have seen a great light. The gloom is gone. And that's what happens to us. When we surrender our life, we say, Jesus, I've messed this up royally, and I can't do anything worse than I have already. You can fix it, though. And I'm trusting you to fix it. When I surrender my life to him, the gloom is gone. Now, it doesn't mean my children suddenly are going to behave the way they're supposed to. It doesn't mean my job is going to get better. My finances instantly will be changed. But the gloom is gone because I know there's a hope for the future. The immediate after effects, the only thing that changes is in me. Around me may not, but inside me, it's instantly changed. So the gloom is gone from our lives, our soul. We suddenly feel that a light has dawned inside of us. And we think about the gloom that we sometimes have in our life. But compare that. It is nothing when compared with the shroud of gloom and darkness that fell over Calvary and Jerusalem on the day that Jesus was crucified. From noon until 3 o'clock, the city is engulfed in darkness. Picture yourself living there, and suddenly it's bright midday and it goes to instant black. Would you be in awe? Would you be in fear? This is not normal. And only one thing has changed. They put one man on the cross and crucified him. And as one of the guards said, truly this man was the Son of God. And at 3 o'clock, the gloom was gone. Jesus had died. The curtain in the temple had been torn in two from top to bottom, which says that now you and I, we have access to God directly. We don't have to go through any priest. We don't need anyone to have that direct communication. The gloom has been lifted from our lives. There is hope for a brighter day because of Jesus and because of what Jesus did for us. There's hope for a brighter day. There's hope for a great light. There's some people who are very content walking around in darkness. Others, they want to escape darkness, but they just don't know how to do that. Some still believe there's no way out of the darkness. One of the great tragedies of life would be for people to be living in darkness when they could live in light. Rose Crawford had been blind for 50 years. And she goes to this surgeon in Ontario. He says, we can do surgery and we can restore vision to you. We can give you vision. 50 years she's been blind. And when they took the bandages off, she was amazed because now there's a world of form and color in front of her. And she was thrilled. Any of us would be, because we've never experienced anything like this before. It's a total revelation to her. And what was sad, she didn't know this operation was available 20 years earlier. She could have had this done when she was 30 years old instead of 50. How many people today are walking around in darkness and they don't realize that there's a great light that's come for them? You see, that's where you and I can help share the message. Could someone have told Rose about this operation earlier? Sure they could have. Could we tell someone about Jesus earlier? Sure we can. And that's what we want to do, because we want them to understand this great light, it's there for them. They can see what they couldn't see before. Isaiah 9:2, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. You know, one of the great joys that many of us have experienced, perhaps everyone in this room, is watching sunrise over an ocean. Isn't that just amazing? As you see this red ball come creeping up over the horizon, and you see the rays shimmering across the water there, and you see the sun as it starts to chase darkness away so rapidly. I mean, it's exciting. We'll go on vacation, you may get up early every morning just to watch the sunrise over the water. And no matter how many times you've seen it, it's still so inspiring to us. Faye's going, yeah. That's her favorite places, out on the water, on the beach there. But see, every night we're hoping for that great light to show up the next morning. John 8:12 talks about that great hope of a great light being fulfilled. Then Jesus spoke to them again, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. Isaiah in 9:2 was prophesying the arrival of the Messiah some 700 years before Christ came to earth. How desperately we seek the light. Because darkness causes fear, it causes uncertainty, it causes us to doubt. We seek the light. How important is the light? Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith co-wrote the song, Thy Word. It's based on Psalm 119, verse 105, which reads, and from the King James Version, Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. The song was recorded at the Caribou Record Studio up high in the Rocky Mountains. And Michael W. Smith had written the chorus, but he couldn't quite come up with anything for verses. So he said, here, Amy, you take this and you do something. Will you finish this song? So he's got the melody, he got the choruses, but he just can't put a verse together. So she's kind of working on this. And again, this is up in the Rockies. It's an 8,000-acre ranch that they're on. So in the evening, Amy Grant goes out walking, and darkness catches up with her. Ever been out in the woods in a foreign area, an area you're not familiar with? Ever been out there in the dark and get lost? Kind of frightening, isn't it? Because you don't know where to go. And this is 8,000 acres. How long would it take for someone to find me in an area this big? And she's walking and looking and searching and getting anxious. And finally she sees a dim light. And she starts going toward that light. And some people say coincidence. I would say no. God guided her, because that light was in her cabin. That was exactly where God wanted her to be. And she went in and immediately sat down with pen and paper and wrote the verses for the song, Thy Word. You see, when we talk about a great light, the light of life that Jesus provides, sometimes when we're in so much darkness, it may only seem like a small glimmer in the distance there. But that's all I need to follow that light. We know that when Israel was wandering in the desert, that during the night, God would lead the Israelites with a pillar of fire so they could see where they're going. That's all I need to do. Follow the light. And that's what Jesus does for us. We overcome the darkness, not because of anything that we do, other than trust and obey. Luke chapter 1, the great physician writes, because of our God's merciful compassion, the dawn from on high will visit us to shine on those who live in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Ever felt like you're living in darkness, the shadow of death? Sometimes we will have that happen. I know my mother used to frequently say, we'd hear about someone who'd passed. My mother would frequently say, well, there's going to be 2 more. It always comes in 3s. So you're going, mm-hmm. And sometimes when it's close family and friends, you feel like the shadow of death is just hovering over your existence. But we have this great light to guide our feet into the way of peace. The Assyrian invasion brought great devastation, great darkness upon Israel, but the people still had reason to hope because the light had dawned. And that same hope is true for us today. We do have a hope for brighter days because we have a hope for a great light. We see in verse 3, our next point, the hope for a nation's blessing. You have enlarged the nation and increased its joy. The people rejoice before you as they rejoice at harvest time and as they rejoice when dividing spoils. When Isaiah writes, if you'll back up one slide, please. When Isaiah writes, you have enlarged the nation, he's using a phrase here as he describes this. It's called the prophetic perfect. It's saying something you have enlarged as though it's already happened, but this is actually a prophecy of what will occur. Prophetic perfect is the style of writing that's called here. These events are in the future, but he's writing as though they've already occurred. He's saying that the nation's joy is increased. See, you and I can count on that. Our personal joy can increase. The nation's joy will be increased because of the victory. God has given them great victory. He continues by drawing a parallel between the joy that the believers have before God and the joy people will experience at harvest. Any of you ever grow up in a farming community? Okay. And there's a lot of work goes into planting and preparing the field and planting and getting through the rain and getting through the droughts and getting through the hailstorms and all of these things. But when the crop finally comes in, is there some rejoicing? I mean, for a lot of families back in the day, that was when the kids got new shoes and got new clothes and got to buy some store-bought food rather than what they could raise on the farm. There's a time of rejoicing there. And it also talks about the joy, rejoicing when you divide spoils. And you go back through history, and when one nation would conquer another, they go in and they would basically loot the area. They would take whatever they wanted. This is called the spoils of war. So people rejoice because now they got some things they didn't have before. What causes you to rejoice right now in your life? What are the things that bring you just the greatest feelings of exultation that you say, boy, this is grand? And certainly we don't want to go to war to accomplish that. When he talks about using the military analogy here, that he's expanded the nation. What if we prayed for God to expand our nation? Personally, not just as a church. We want to do that. We want our church to reach out and to bring more people into God's kingdom. But what about for you and me personally? If we go to 1 Chronicles chapter 4, many of you perhaps have read Bruce Wilkins' book called The Prayer of Jabez. And it's based upon this verse. Jabez called out to the God of Israel, if only you would bless me, extend my border, let your hand be with me and keep me from harm, so I will not cause any pain. And God granted his request. Now, what if we did that? Back up one slide, please. He called out to God, if only you would bless me, extend my border. Now, what's a border for us as believers? Because we own a little plot of land that we live on. Are you saying, okay, I want the house on this side, and I want the house on that side, and the one behind me as well, and the one across the street? Is that what we're saying? What if God said, what do you mean by this? And I said, when I say extend my borders, God, I want you to extend my ministry. God, I want you to extend my compassion to people in need. I want you to extend my ability, my willingness to evangelize to those who are lost. You see, I can say, God, would you extend my borders, my reach, not for what I gain, but for what I can give. We start changing because God says, I want to do these things for you. We could pray in a very straightforward manner. Jabez did. Jabez is actually talking land. He's saying, expand my borders. And if we go to the next portion of this verse, God granted his request. Let your hand be with me, keep me from harm. He's very straightforward. Now, some people say it's not an eloquent prayer, but you know what? God hears our heart more so than the words. He's not concerned about if you're poetic in how you phrase this. What does your heart say to him? That's what he looks at. We have a hope for freedom, our fourth item. For you have shattered their oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did on the day of Midian. This type of deliverance that Isaiah is speaking of seems impossible. Assyria is a world power. They've come in, they've conquered these two regions of Israel. God's people, they're weak and they are crushed. Maybe you have felt weak and crushed yourself. Maybe some of you sitting here feel that way right now. When the prophet refers to the day of Midian, he's referring to Judges chapter 7. And you have sermon notes there in your bulletin, so you can go back and look at these later. In Judges chapter 7, we had the account where Gideon, with just a handful of troops, but with the power of God, defeats the oppressive Midianites and expels them from the land. We think, now, how powerful is God? Recently I saw just a smidgen of a show, and Jeff, you would appreciate this. They're talking about some of the great college football upsets of all time. And there's this panel probably of 10 people that are on there, and they're talking about what they thought was the biggest upset in that one. And, what's his name? Reese Davis. Reese Davis made the comment. He said, now we're talking about, David versus Goliath type games. But let me tell you something, folks. He said, when we talk about David versus Goliath, David had God on his side. It was overwhelming odds in his favor. Well, isn't that the way it is? We're not talking about anything other than God's power. Gideon and just a few troops couldn't defeat Midian. But with God's power, they could. That's why we have hope. I don't rely upon my strength because I know it's useless to me. But we have to understand that there's a vision for us. There's a gentleman named Lord Kenneth Clark. He was internationally known for his television series titled Civilization. He lived and died without faith in Jesus Christ. In his autobiography, he admitted that while visiting a beautiful church, he had what he believed to be an overwhelming religious experience. He wrote, "My whole being was irradiated by a kind of heavenly joy, far more intense than anything I had known before." But this gloom of grace, as he described it, created a problem. If he allowed himself to be influenced by it, he knew he would have to change. His family might think he had lost his mind, and maybe that intense joy would just simply prove to be an illusion. He concluded, "I was too deeply embedded in the world to change course." You see, we have the hope for freedom, and Kenneth Clark felt like he couldn't be free from the world he was trapped in. But the Lord tells us that the victory over the enemy is ours as long as we walk in his power. Number 5, there's a hope for peace. For the trampling boot of battle and the bloody garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire. If we connect back with the military language here, God is telling us there's hope for peace. Eternal hope, eternal peace is offered through the one who fought the battle and conquered sin and death and the grave. And when we look at this, the garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire, saying war will never happen again. The battles are over for you. We're taking all the uniforms and we're going to burn them because we will not need them any longer. Well, see, that's what will happen with our earthly bodies. They will rot, they will decay. We will need these no longer because the battle has been fought and won on our behalf. Jesus has done that for us. So we do have this great hope for peace, and we know the answer. Now we get to the part that most people are very familiar with, the hope for a royal birth announcement. Verse 6, for a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There's 400 years of silence between Old Testament and New Testament. Now, for a nation that's been hearing from God regularly from their inception, 400 years of silence. What are you thinking? God doesn't love us anymore. God has written us off. God is done with us. And you got generations that come and live and die, and they don't know that God is still out there for them. But God had not forgotten his people. He's not forgotten us. Sometimes you may feel like my prayers are not being answered. Brother Van, he's just not saying anything to me. Well, our lives are very short in comparison to the 400 years. But we want to cling to the prophecy that was given in verse 6, and it's fulfilled in Luke 2:11. Today, a Savior who is Messiah the Lord was born for you in the city of David. 700 years apart, 400 years of silence, but today a Savior who is the Messiah the Lord was born for you. Do you think about that in a personal sense? That he was born for you, Sandy? He's born for you, Asher? Born for you, Butch? Sometimes we think that maybe he's born for others, but for me, because we know we're not worthy. And the truth is, none of us are worthy. But yes, he was born for you, and for all of us who would accept and believe in him. What a great hope to have for that royal birth announcement, and then for the birth to be fulfilled. Lastly, we have a hope for eternity. A lady named Norma Lobby of La Mesa, California. She's browsing, doing some shopping one day, and she's got a little boy with her. And her little boy is just at the age where he's learning to read. And because he's excited about learning to read, he's trying to read everything that he can. So she's going through this department store. She's in the maternity department. He's trying to read every label, every sign. And he finally looks up and says, "Mom, look, they're making clothes for eternity." Well, I don't know that the department stores are manufacturing clothes for eternity, but God is. Isaiah 9:7. The dominion will be vast, and its prosperity will never end. You see, that's called eternity, when we say it will never end. He will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. See, the zeal, that speaks of God's love. How much he loves you. What he's willing to do for you. That he was willing to send his son to die for you. That's great zeal. If I went around and asked you, said, who would you die for? You could probably give me a few names. Kids, spouse. Some of you may say, let's take the spouse first. Let them be the one. But would you die for me? And I dare say most of you would say, I kind of like you, but not that much. I understand that. That's okay. But God does. So much that he would die for you and for me. And like all the things that you do or that I do, he still loves us that much. And that's all that we need. When we think of the hopes that God offers us, that we see in this passage, the hope for brighter days. Oh my, how we look for those. The hope for a great light to illuminate our dark world. The hope for a nation's blessing. The hope for freedom. The hope for peace. The hope for that royal birth announcement. Most importantly, perhaps, the hope for eternity. That is just everything. It's amazing how much one passage can tell us about the love of our Lord. It's so explicit. And if you've never surrendered your life, you've never had that great hope, this is the time to simply say, Brother Van, let's talk about that. I just want to understand more. And maybe someone here is saying, I'm ready to surrender my life because I want to have the hope that you have. It's an eternal hope. And we know that God never fails us on his promises.